Hello. Welcome to episode number 61 of CXOTalk. I am Michael Krigsman, and as always, I am here with my truly incredible, despite the fact that we like to insult him and taunt him, and especially torment him, especially since I just learned that in his family, he ranks below the cat. The truth has to come out.
That's
Vala Afshar. Vala.
Hi, Michael. Thank you very much. I love cats and dogs. Thank you.
Loves cats and dogs. And Vala, we're here with a tremendous guest today.
What an honor and a privilege for us to have one of the most extraordinary CIOs on CXOTalk we've had today.
Yes, we're here with Jeanette Horan, who is the Vice President and CIO of IBM. Hi, Jeanette. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
You're welcome.
And I see from the background you are in the middle of New York City.
I am indeed. I'm at the IBM office at 590 Madison Avenue today.
Oh, cool.
Well, Jeanette, let's jump right in and tell us very briefly about your professional background, and then tell us about your role at IBM. What does the CIO of IBM do?
Yeah, so by training, I'm a mathematician and a software engineer, and that certainly is where I began my early career, working in systems programming, operating systems, and compilers, and such like. And as I moved further up into management and started to learn more about sort of business strategy and the intersection of IT and business, I really became interested in how technology could be applied to improve the way that people work. And that was actually what brought me in the mid-90s when I was working at Digital Equipment up there near Boston to the Alta Vista search engine in those very early days of the Internet. And from there to Lotus, where, of course, the whole kind of programming paradigm around Lotus Notes and collaboration really came to the fore. And from there, obviously, kind of, into IBM. And I sometimes tell people I'm a CIO by accident because I spent most of my career more on the product side of the business. And in 2006, was given an opportunity to come work for the then CIO in what I, at the time, thought would be my kind of 18 months to 2 years tour through corporate that a lot of IBM execs do, and then move back into a business unit. But I found I got hooked and got the opportunity to become the CIO 3 years ago now. So, and being the CIO at IBM is an interesting role because obviously, we ourselves are a very large IT company. And sometimes I tell people I have 400,000 people who think they know how to do my job better than I do, and probably many of them do. So I have a lot of advisors. But I really look at my role in three areas. One area is really obviously to enable all of those 400,000 people and the various subcontractors who work with us to be able to work effectively. So all of the tools that they use to do their jobs day in and day out, I obviously have to provision and support them and make sure they have access to the information and the tools that they need. The second area is around integration with the business. I think if you look at what's been happening with IBM over the last several years, our business mix has shifted tremendously. And so sort of figuring out what the business really needs and how we can support the business is probably really the second thing, and in some ways I think probably the most critical thing that I do. And that really usually takes the form of kind of new projects. What are the new projects we're deploying to enable the business to work in different ways? And then the third area is an area that I say if I wasn't at a company like IBM, the business probably wouldn't care about. Because it's what you think of as the core IT work that we do around kind of what actually happens in the data center, and all of the technologies that we deploy there kind of is the third area of what my role entails.
Great. Last week, Jeanette, we had Oliver Bussman, the CIO of UBS, former CIO at SAP, and Oliver manages an 8,000-person IT organization. I was wondering the size of your IT organization at IBM as the first question, and then a follow-up to that, I suspect the number is in the thousands, and you often talk about the importance of collaboration, and I wanted to learn a little bit about, your approach in terms of, truly building collaboration, not only in a 400,000 employee ecosystem, but even within your IT organization.
Yeah, so my IT organization is sort of an interesting one because I outsource to IBM's own strategic outsourcing business. So both our data center operations and also our application maintenance and development is outsourced to IBM's global. So if you look at it from the perspective of a traditional retained organization, I have about 5,000 people in my organization. But if I add the other two service providers together, there's probably about another 12,000 people in those organizations as well. And because we are all IBMers, even though I operate as a customer of those organizations, we do tend to collaborate fairly closely, especially when it comes to deployment of new technologies and how are we really going to support the business in the best way. And collaboration is a really interesting issue and challenge, I think, for all of us these days. We operate in 170 different countries, and today I think the norm is that project teams are going to be in more than one location. I think it's very rare that everybody all comes to the same office and works together. And so we've had to figure out what are the different tools that people can use to work most effectively. And I mean, obviously you can start with things like email, but I think one of the most important tools that we have in the business today actually is instant messaging. And it sounds strange to say, but I get more calls if the same time servers go down than probably anything else, because it becomes sort of the fabric of how do people connect. And more so than just the actual instant message itself, I think, is the presence awareness of, am I online and available to talk? People might choose to chat over an instant message, or they might choose to pick up the phone, but they at least know they can reach out and touch someone. But more recently, we've been moving much more towards an internal social platform that's obviously built on an IBM product called IBM Connections, which has wikis and blogs and forums and communities that allow people to share files or hold discussions or really to be able to collaborate across boundaries. Because I think one of the biggest challenges that you have when you're a global organization, the one thing that none of us can solve is time zones. And so if you've got a project that's where people are working, maybe across 12 different time zones, they're never all going to be awake at the same time. So you need a way to be able to store the information and hand it off and make sure that people can work more effectively. And so we've been using that platform and really encouraging people to think about how do they share what they're doing. Obviously, we've published a lot about this on Twitter, and you're encouraging questions from your audience on a Twitter stream. We're really trying to encourage people to do the same thing inside of IBM, to be able to share what they're working on, even to be able to reach out and say, hey, here's an issue I'm working. Has anybody seen this before? And what we're finding is that the community is really rallying around that as a way to be able to make what is a very large company feel like a much smaller company for people to work in.
You've been talking about collaboration, and we've had some discussion so far about technology. So my question is, what is the real job of a CIO? Is it about the technology, or is it about the people relationships or non-technology factors? So how would you characterize it?
So I think the job of a CIO has been and always will be about the intersection of business and technology. Clearly, we don't do IT for IT's sake. We do it to help a business colleague in some way, shape, or form, whether it's dealing with a problem or creating some new opportunity. That's really what it's about how can we apply technology to those business opportunities. And so I think the CIO has to understand what the business of the firm is and understand how you can actually bring some of the technologies to bear. And I think that's why we're seeing, actually in a lot of different cases today, CIOs have maybe spent some time in a line of business, just as I myself have. And when I came into the CIO organization, I certainly knew our software group inside and out, but I've learned far more about the IBM company from this role than I ever would have done in a software group only role, because you're very deep as opposed to very broad. But gaining that broader understanding, I think, is one of the things that's really important. And I think being able to sort of demonstrate and play back to the business that you do actually understand what they're trying to do. So that, when you get the inevitable challenges of the, no, you don't understand, we're different, you can say, actually, yes, I do understand, and I do understand where you need to be different for a very good reason, because your business model is different, versus where, a standard process is actually kind of the best thing for the IBM company. I think being able to have those discussions is really critically important.
I read that your team supports, hopefully I'm not mistaken, nearly 4,500 business applications at IBM. And so I'm wondering how much of your day and your team's work is, meeting your internal stakeholders' needs or external customers. I mean, 4,500 apps is pretty incredible.
Well, the first thing I'm actually proud to say is that as of the end of last year, we actually got that down just under 3,000.
Just under 3,000. Okay. All right. Okay, now it sounds easy.
It's actually a conscious part of the strategy, because part of the business strategy was to get to more global common process. And if you want global processes, you need to have global applications. And so we have been in the process of moving everybody onto strategic apps and sunsetting all of kind of more of the regional apps. But I would say that, certainly for my retained organization, 80% of what they do is working with the business to understand the business requirements and where the business is going. And, either, what modifications do we need to make to existing apps? Where do we need to completely re-engineer and introduce a new application? Or how are we going to support where the business is going within that application portfolio?
We have a comment from Twitter. This is not so much as a question as an accusation from my friend Alan Lipovsky, who's an analyst with Constellation. And so Alan says, okay, we're talking about collaboration and technology, and he says, nice dance around the word culture. So what about the role of culture and the intersection with technology? Any thoughts about, and business transformation, any thoughts about that?
I think that's really an interesting question, and I do know Alan, so it's nice to talk to him here today. But, culture in a lot of ways is the make or break of any transformation program. There are some things that you're going to do in a business which truly are not optional, and I use examples of, for example, if you're going to roll out an upgrade to your general ledger, everybody has to use that same version of the general ledger, and it's not optional. But in many, many other applications and spaces, especially where you're talking about more individual productivity or team productivity, it truly is optional for people to be able to adopt or not adopt the different tools. And obviously as well, being an IT company, people always have lots of ways to kind of invent their own solutions if they don't want the one that we're rolling out. And so I think culture is really critically important. And what I'm seeing today, certainly around, and I'm going to change the term collaboration to one more of engagement. What we're seeing is a real leadership from the top at IBM. As an example, when Ginny Rometty became the CEO, she decided that she wanted to engage with all employees using a video blog format, where she will post either a replay of a video blog or even maybe a live video broadcast, and encourage employees to comment or ask questions and sort of really drive engagement in that way. And so we're seeing that now obviously kind of sort of flow down, right? This becomes successful and people like it, and so then the next level of senior vice presidents are following suit and doing the same kind of thing. And I do think that leadership from the top is one element of how you get broader adoption of some of these technologies. But there's also the grassroots. Today, it used to be the vision of an IBMer was somebody who came to IBM from college and stayed here until they retired. And today that is just not the case. If you look at how our business has shifted over the last few years with acquisitions and divestitures and the growth in some of our growth markets, today about half of the IBM population has less than 5 years with the company. And so they come into the company with expectations and experiences either from college or from other employers. And they come with their own ways of working and their own ways of collaborating with other people. And so we see a lot of, from the ground up, communities building of people with common interests. They might be a community of practice, like business consultants, or they might be a project team, of people who are trying to work across a global project team, kind of just forming their own communities and coming together. And I think today within the Connections platform, I think we have about 86,000 communities at this point in time, and that's much more, as I say, of the bottoms up as opposed to the tops down, but a little bit of both.
What are some of the great opportunities where IT can serve IBM business, in your opinion? You talked about, the diversity of talent, young talent coming into the business. Obviously, they're mobile, they're social, they're connected. It's, soon it's going to be bring your own wearable, with their glasses and watches and sensors. So how do you feel there's the greatest opportunity for IT to serve the business?
Well, we have the very formal means that I would say, which is the working with either the lines of business or with our enterprise process owners to make sure that we're delivering the capability that's needed. But let me just talk to you about actually one project that I'm actually really excited about this year that we're rolling out, and we call it iFund IT. And this is a Kickstarter model where one of the business challenges that I wanted to have my team solve is to help the business to truly embrace mobility. And the big question, once you've got beyond the sort of basics of providing people mail, calendar, and contacts on a mobile device, you want to move into what are the real business applications that people would find useful. Now, I could sit here and imagine and dream up what they might find useful, but instead we decided let's go out and ask the community. So in a Kickstarter model, what I did was I set aside a budget, and I said the only rule for this year's Kickstarter model is that it needs to be mobile app development. And so I took a budget and I went out and I asked for volunteers to be investors, and then I gave them each a chip for $2,000. So I said, okay. And then we went out with a call for projects. And within the first 3 weeks, we had over 1,000 project submissions.
Wow.
And so we're now, and so the funders with their $2,000, they can choose to spend $10 on a project or all $2,000 on one project, but they basically are selecting how to invest the money. And we're in that process right now of sort of going through that sort of matching, and several projects have already received their full funding. And my goal is to, kind of have mobile apps that the business is asking for and that they want. We have a mobile app store. So we'll put the apps into the App Store, and then we'll let people rate them, and we'll see how many people download them and see kind of how good the ideas were. But it's really a way to allow us to be, I want to say, sort of the IT organization that says yes, instead of the IT organization that says, no, we can't do that, or come back in 6 months' time, all the things that we traditionally are charged with as, the criticisms of traditional IT organizations.
That's pretty extraordinary, actually, to think of yourself as trying to be the yes CIO as opposed to the no CIO. And we know that the no CIO leads to the state of IT where nobody likes IT. But it's hard, but how do you balance, but being the yes CIO, it seems to me that on the one hand, the company says to IT in general, you need to save money, okay? We need to reduce our costs, figure out how to reduce our infrastructure costs, and so forth. And at the same time, being the yes CIO means increasing innovation. So, and I think many CIOs face this almost mutually exclusive set of requests. Cut your costs, innovate, and support the business. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean that definitely is the dilemma for every CIO, right? And I try to sort of look at it from the perspective of where are we spending money today and what are the things that we spend money on, and where are there opportunities to optimize. And certainly, you know, there are cases where, you know, we're going to take advantage of the inherent, you know, price performance curves of technology, right? You know, as they come down, you know, things get a little cheaper to be able to run, whether that's in our data center or whether it's in things like, you know, kind of voice contracts with our cell phone providers. You know, there's a lot of opportunities to just sort of walk down that natural curve. But we definitely are always looking for how we can get to more efficiency in the way that we operate the business, because, you know, the goal is to get more money into the new things, the things that add value to the business. So running in steady state is the first area that we're constantly looking to optimize. And we have actually a pretty good partnership. One of the great things actually about being the CIO in IBM is, you know, I have access to, you know, a truly world-class research organization. And if I have a challenge of something that I want to solve, you know, then I can, you know, look to research for a partnership, you know, kind of, and how can we, you know, work on some of those efficiency things that can allow us to innovate to provide more value. But it's interesting, the way I sort of see us moving now, I mean, in today's world, is really how can we provide maybe more of a set of services to the business, as opposed to, you know, just kind of, you know, we run IT and everything's behind the curtain, that they can really choose of kind of, you know, how can they run the business. And we certainly, I mean, obviously in today's world, you know, we're looking at more, you know, kind of software as a service plays, you know, and then we become kind of much more of the broker of those services within my organization that allows us to provide, you know, kind of some innovation along those lines. So it's probably a bit of a long answer, sorry.
So, I mean, I see you active on Twitter, you know, public social networks, and, you know, you mentioned how internally you and your team are leveraging social platforms to connect and engage. How have you had to work with the business to help them better relate to IT? I mean, and, you know, you're talking about a 17,000 IT organization, so do you are they town hall meetings, internal blogs, video summaries of initiatives? How do you you know, bring the business closer to IT and vice versa?
Yeah, so we do a number of things. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say there's like the broad communication things that, yes, I mean, you know, I'll do a video blog or even a, you know, kind of a written blog on different topics to talk about what we're working on. And I actually encourage, I mean, a lot of my sort of individual project leaders will do the same thing. And we certainly share in our own internal social networks, you know, like if there's something that's either going to go live or something that's just gone live, you know, we definitely use that as a mechanism for broad sharing of information. Right. But I do think that there are times as well where, certainly when you're making change in a big organization, you have to have the human touch. And the benefit of stakeholder management becomes really important. And the stakeholder management is really much more than just, you know, sort of the training of there's a new version of something that's going live and let me bring a training class to you. I think it really starts at the beginning with a discussion with the key stakeholders around what are we trying to do here, right? What are we trying to change and why? Are we trying to solve a problem? Are we trying to create a new opportunity? But let's all make sure that we're clear on what our purpose is here together. And then that gives us a framework on which to move forward. And one of the things that we've been doing is trying to engage much more with some of the stakeholder groups and even the design of a new application, say, using kind of much more formal design methods. And in fact, where I am today, I'm actually on the floor here in New York City in our joint marketing and communications and IT design lab, where the teams come together here to work in very collaborative small teams on very fast iterations to do things together, that allows us to bring much more of that formal design thinking, which I think allows us to then sort of bring the business along with us. So in other words, it's not something that we're doing to them, but it's something that we're doing with them and for them that I think really makes a difference.
We have a question from Twitter from Zachary Jeans, who asks about shadow IT, and he asks whether you see shadow IT as a source of innovative ideas, or to use his term, as an enemy, or I would say, you know, a problem or a challenge. Or how do you view shadow IT?
So, I mean, obviously, I mean, in some ways, I mean, like we're an IT company, so if I was to tell you we didn't have any shadow IT, I would be lying. You know? But one of the things that we've done is to try to provide people with what I consider to be, I call it a safe playground to play in. So, as well as our, kind of production data centers that we have, I maintain an innovation lab. Which is not subject to the same service level agreements and production SLAs, etc. that the production labs are subject to, and I provide within that what we call our technology adoption program. And even though it started before the term platform as a service was a popular term, you could think of it as being exactly that. So I provide an environment that had kind of database and WebSphere and sort of various of the tooling for people to be able to create applications. And let them do that. And we have probably about 25% of the IBM population is active on tap. Either creating short-term business applications or downloading and using those business applications. And it's very much a what I call a graduate or die model. In that if the app becomes successful and becomes adopted across the business, then we figure out how to move it into production. But if it was sort of an interesting idea, or even sometimes there are requirements for an app that just lives for a short period of time for a particular project or program, for example, then that's an ideal environment for it, because then when the need is gone, we can redeploy the assets that were being used. And I think it's sometimes these kinds of programs where you tell people it's actually we don't want to stifle innovation, we actually want to encourage innovation. And by providing people a mechanism and a forum to do that, it's kind of, I mean, it's not exactly shadow IT, but it is more in the open, but it's alongside of the official production portfolio.
I recently attended an IDC conference here in Boston, and there was a marketing track that talked about digital transformation and impact in marketing, and they showed a graph, and this was a survey of hundreds of CMOs and marketing experts talking about shift in program spend, where in 2009 digital spend was roughly 10% of marketing program spend, and their IDC is projecting that in a year or two 50% of total marketing program spend will be digital marketing. So I'm curious, and today you're actually in the IT marketing design center in New York City. Is there more demand on your organization from marketing today than before? And what are some of the projects and initiatives that you see, advice to other CIOs in terms of making sure marketing organizations are successful?
Yeah, we've seen a huge change in our relationship with marketing, I'm going to say over the last 2 to 3 years. Where, I mean, if I go back 5 years, I mean, certainly the marketing organization probably have very little demand on IT. I mean, obviously, we kept the corporate website for them and provided them a way to publish content. And certainly, I mean, some degree of sort of online engagement with our clients, whether it was in sort of private stores or certainly if you think about it in the technical support category, we had online relationships with many of our clients. But today, I agree with the statement. What we're seeing from marketing is that, they want sort of more and more to be through a digital medium. And so we've been investing with them over the last couple of years in a lot of what I would consider to be the infrastructure elements of that, with respect to making sure that, for example, we've actually been deploying Unica. Actually, even before IBM bought Unica, we started to deploy the Unica platform to be able to do much more automation in the marketing processes. And now we're sort of working with them on making sure that we have robust information about our clients. If you think about it, IBM's a B2B company, kind of primarily. And so our traditional view in IT of a customer master would be, company X or company Y. But today, what we're finding is that we want to know much more about the individual. So if an individual is coming to engage with us digitally, do we know, are they a CIO or are they a CMO or are they a database administrator? Kind of what is their role and what's the kind of information that they're most likely to want to see? And I think this sort of, kind of alignment of sort of figuring out how do we build for them the the information platform that then allows the marketing teams to leverage that information in the most productive and appropriate way is really where I see the trends heading. And I think that this sort of difference between sort of B2C versus B2B, a few years ago I would have said it was very stark, right? The way that people engaged with their clients. But I'm seeing them merging now, and that people want to be dealt with as an individual as opposed to just a person in a company. And I want you to know me, and I want you to know what white papers I've looked at before, and not just that my company has downloaded those white papers. So,
absolutely, I absolutely agree. That level of contextual intelligence that allows digital marketeers to really segment to one, you, as the consumer, and certainly my own budget. When I look at just the last few years compared to next fiscal year, how much of that program spend is going towards social listening tools, customer relationship management that touches the sales, services, marketing automation. Lots of studies that point to the number of touch points during the buying journey in B2B, over a dozen meaningful touch points before you can, earn the business. And all of that insight is critically important to marketeers. Do you believe that, marketing in the future, you will have to have a technical background to be able to find employment in marketing? It seems like it's more of a technology and science than art.
Well, I think you better have a good buddy who's got a technical background if you can't have one yourself.
That's right.
It's marketing has, I think, sort of long been an art, but certainly in digital marketing, it's a science as well. I mean, you think about sort of the role of the data scientist in the digital marketing context. I mean, it's really, I guess, how do you get value out of that data? It's really the important thing, because it really is all about improving the touch point that you have with the client, right? It's like you want to make things more meaningful to that person,
Sure.
As opposed to a sort of, as I say, kind of the old notion of a website which was just a broad push of information to anybody who came.
If I had the budget, I would just buy Watson.
So let's actually talk for a moment about Watson. Can you talk a little bit about the way that IT and IBM are using analytics, and how are you using Watson internally? So what's going on with Watson from your IT perspective?
Yeah, let's talk about Watson first, and then we can talk about analytics more broadly. But yeah, I mean, Watson obviously, is just a fantastic technology, and it certainly has come a long way from 3 years ago now with the original Jeopardy challenge. And when you look at some of the problems that Watson is helping to solve in, for example, in some of the healthcare field or the financial services field, you can certainly see the power of Watson as being a tool to really help people sift through kind of vast quantities of information that any one individual just can't consume all the data that's coming at them, or the information that's coming at them at any one point in time. And I think the notion for Watson to be able to be trained on the kinds of questions that are important and how do you actually navigate through that information is really the powerful thing. So we're actually looking at a couple of different use cases internally. One of them obviously is in both the internal and the customer-facing help desk solutions here. For our technical support professionals, currently the sort of state of the art is, kind of if they're on the phone, being able to use Watson to help them, either ask the next best question or be able to say, have you tried this or have you tried that? But ultimately, I think the goal with that would be to enable the customers to become self-service using Watson technologies to guide them through a diagnosis, which would be really interesting. The other area is in support of our go-to-market professionals. We have a very broad portfolio of offerings to the marketplace and new things coming every week, it seems. And I sometimes sort of feel sorry for the salespeople who just must feel like they're absolutely deluged with information that's coming at them from all of the different brands and all of the different product teams. And I think being able to sort of categorize and catalog all of that information in a way that if they want to know, do we have any clients in the healthcare industry that have used that product or that product,
Right.
I think can become a very helpful tool for our sales professionals. And so we're currently in process of teaching Watson how to answer those kinds of questions, so that we can hopefully deploy kind of Watson for that purpose. So I definitely do see applicability for it. But if I talk more broadly about analytics, as you're probably all aware, we've had a few years ago sort of kind of launched the notion around a smarter planet, and we've now been thinking internally about the notion about a smarter enterprise, right? So, how do we enable different units within the IBM company to make use of the vast amounts of information that we have at our disposal? And we have invested within my organization in I'll call it kind of an internal software as a service platform that actually has the Cognos and SPSS technologies in it that allows the business to be able to write reports using Cognos, or to be able to do much more meaningful analytics and predictive analytics using SPSS from all of the information that's in all of our information warehouses across IBM. And this has become an amazingly successful project because it's actually opened up information to the business that they kind of never knew we really had, or very few people knew we had. And it's made it much more accessible for people. And so we have a lot of projects going, obviously, with our finance organization, but with our supply chain organization, our HR organization, where they can actually get access to this information. And my team's role is not only to support that infrastructure, but also to provide a getting started help, if you will. I call it the teach them to fish type of model, right? I don't want them to just always have to come and ask me to produce reports or run analyses for them, but I want to enable them to do it themselves.
Sure. Well, I want to go back to something you said earlier about your safe technology playground, and you mentioned the term that programs either graduate or die. And to me, that goes directly to the question of software adoption. So to me, it means either they. Well, let me ask you. What exactly does that mean? Graduate or die?
So generally, if you think about it in this technology adoption model, it's going to be somebody in some line of business in some job role says, okay, I've got a problem that isn't being solved by traditional IT, and I'd like some application to help me with that problem. And if they are willing to invest kind of the time, themselves to actually do the development, to actually sort of think about how can I actually create an application to solve that, and they put it out on tap. Now, the question becomes, what does it mean for it to be successful? So, if your two best friends say, okay, I'm going to come and use this application, that doesn't really kind of, hit the bar. But we try to look for sort of meaningful populations. And certainly, kind of in the IBM case, if it's one of these, something that's been started by an individual, we're going to look for thousands of people, tens of thousands of people to adopt it before we would say it would graduate, right? Because it really has to be something that's meaningful to a large enough population. But then as we graduate, what we mean when we graduate it is that it becomes an officially supported application in our portfolio. And it would be moved into a production data center and would be maintained and managed by my organization. If it's something that has an initial kind of spike and the sort of hype curve, right? That people are very excited, but then we find it's really not being accessed and used. Then we'll go back to the originator and say, look, we really think this is past its useful life, and it's time to move on to something else.
I had read that your team reached a milestone a few years ago, I think in 2012, where 51% of your investments focused on front office application development versus historically, majority of spend was for back office applications. Is this a sign that successful IT organizations are reducing the gap between corporate IT and customers and really focusing on delivering insight and meaningful data and applications to enable, again, customer-facing and front office part of IBM? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's sort of so that sort of also comes back to your question about the sort of digitalization of the business, right? So clearly there's been a huge increase in spending in what we do to support marketing and certainly the digital marketing. But even in terms of supporting, our sales teams and our consulting professionals, our services professionals who are out with clients every day, kind of the tools that they use to help them while they're in front of clients is where I think a lot of the investment has been. Even if it's things like running what you might think of as being, kind of an internal process, such as, I don't know, for example, managing pricing approvals or something like that. To the extent that we can automate those processes and make them easier for our salespeople, it gives them more time in front of the clients. And I think that that's the important thing. But where I think we're going to be moving now is much, much more into the truly self-service world for clients. Certainly, as you see more of our offerings going to market as a service,
right.
You're going to see much less of a get to a point and a salesperson will call you, because now it's going to be a big kind of corporate decision and a big proof of concept and a big PO. We're moving now into where it's kind of try and buy, and there's going to be sort of much more, I think, sort of truly self-service. And I think that also is going to put much more of the emphasis of the spend into that part of the business.
Absolutely. Are you seeing a trend towards breaking up very large, we're used to these very long multi-year IT projects. Are you seeing a trend towards breaking these up and chunking them so that there are shorter projects that are producing results faster?
Yeah, we've definitely been seeing that. I mean, I think this started a few years ago as we talked about sort of moving towards agile development. But I think in the early days of agile development, it was truly in the development cycle, but we might still have a 9 or 12 month long project. It might have multiple iterations, but it still would wait until the end in order to deliver something. But now what we're seeing is a notion around take smaller pieces of functionality, deliver incremental value to the business. And I think sort of that is a way that we have to work, because we have to keep up with the pace of change in the business, which is something that really has accelerated, I think, over the last couple of years. If we imagine a multi-year project, by the time we get done, the business has moved on. So we really need to be thinking in much smaller increments and being able to be more flexible and being able to respond to changes and requirements.
What about, we're just about done, but we haven't spoken very much directly about cloud. Do you want to just say a few words, few thoughts about cloud before we finish up?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, we're looking now at anything new that we do is definitely cloud first. And one of the things that I have my team currently doing is doing a pretty complete survey of all of the software as a service properties that could support a company the scale of IBM. And obviously, IBM has a number of such software as a service properties ourselves that we offer to the market, and clearly we're looking at deploying all of those inside of IBM. And I definitely see this trend, certainly for a lot of what you might consider a lot of the traditional back office functions, or certainly employee productivity, of software as a service being a preferred model for the future. Now, when it comes to if we're really going to do brand new development, the next thing obviously is platform as a service. IBM's just launched Bluemix, which provides all of the middleware products as a service. And we're working with our GBS team to be able to train them and make sure that any new application development we do is done using that platform as a service model. And then obviously there's infrastructure as a service as well. And again, anything new that we do, we will design for infrastructure as a service. And then we're looking at our existing application portfolio to determine, what really should be moved out of an internal data center into more of an infrastructure as a service model, or even more infrastructure as a service, but within our own environment, right, in order to get the flexibility and the agility from it. We probably I'm probably just like every other CIO. We have a lot of legacy applications, many of which were developed for scale up versus scale out, which is really the kind of cloud-based model is much more of a scale out model. And so I think it'll take us some amount of time to see the infrastructure as a service really kind of take hold in our legacy portfolio. But certainly everything new is going cloud.
Okay. Well, I think we're just about at that time.
So I know you earned an MBA from Boston University, and you must be a Red Sox fan. So can we leverage Watson to help us figure out how we can get out of this 7-game losing streak? Is there any?
Yeah, I think Watson might have a few good answers for that.
Okay. I wish we could talk more because, I mean, I'm dying to know about, for example, bring your own device for a 400,000 employee company, but this has been the fastest 45 minutes we've had on CXOTalk. So
well, why don't you come back another time and join us for another show?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I learned incredible amount, and I really appreciate your shared wisdom. Thank you very much.
So we have to thank Jeanette Horan, who is the CIO of IBM, for coming on CXOTalk live. And this is not scripted. So if anybody thinks that we're following a script here, think again. So Jeanette, you're very kind for doing this, and we're very grateful to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm Michael Krigsman. You have been watching episode number 61 of CXOTalk with Vala Afshar. Vala.
Great show, thanks.
And I hope that you will come back next time, everybody who's been watching.
We're going on the road, by the way.
Oh, yes, we're going on the road. Tell them about that, Vala.
No, CIO Magazine, we're working with Editor-in-Chief of CIO Magazine, Mary Fran Johnson. On June 11th, we'll be in Fairfax, Virginia, where we're going to have our CXOTalk Live. And we have two extraordinary CIOs who will join us on CXOTalk. Dr. Elisa Johnson, Deputy CIO of Executive Office of the President, the White House, and David Bray, the CIO of FCC. So it should be a pretty extraordinary CXOTalk Live on the road.
So that will be on June 11th, and I hope you'll join us for that. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.